What's up, Path to Freedom listeners? Excited to be back on the mic. This is my first episode of 2023. Took some time off over the holidays to just really unplug, spend some good time with the family, and really just put myself in a position to kind of refocus and hit the ground running here in 2023. So, with that, I know this is a little bit late, but I hope you had a wonderful holiday season and that your new year 2023 is off to a great start. So for those that listen to the podcast regularly, I'm sure you've noticed that haven't had any new episodes come out over the last couple of months. And that was intentional. I really just wanted to take some time to really unplug and enjoy the holiday season with my family. And I'm very thankful and fortunate that, because of the businesses that we own, we have the flexibility to do that. But anyways, all of that's about to change because, I'm coming in fast and furious, looking at 2023 in terms of setting some big goals for the podcast, as well as a number of other things. So I'm going to share a little bit of kind of what I have planned for the upcoming year and beyond. And then just want to kind of share a couple of other thoughts with you. And as of next week, we'll be back to kind of the regular interview format podcast coming out every week on Thursday mornings. But in terms of a couple of updates, if you're watching this, you probably notice I'm sitting in what looks like an empty office because it is. But this is the future podcast studio for Path to Freedom. I've always recorded the podcast in my home office, which has been fine. But as I mentioned, I've set some really big goals for myself. That includes, the podcast and really growing the audience and, trying to put out as much valuable information and content as I can and reach as many people as possible. So, my wife and I have owned an office building for the last couple of years, and it's been vacant for the last several months. We were planning to sell it, but have since decided that we're going to hang on to it. So this is my opportunity to build a legitimate podcast studio. So stay tuned over the next couple of weeks as the studio comes together. I'm excited about it, and I think it'll help me produce a better quality show, which, at the end of the day, the goal is to just add as much value as I can to those of you that listen. So anyways, I'm excited about that, but bear with me as it kind of comes together. I know it's not much to look at right now, but that's going to change. So anyways, that's, I guess, one update on the podcast. As I mentioned, next week we'll get back into kind of the normal routine of the interview format podcast. Historically, I've had a lot of my podcast guests, that are from the franchisor side of things. I've interviewed a lot of founders of brands, and particularly brands that I have a relationship with and, I'm able to refer people to. And I'm going to continue to do that, right? Because I get really good feedback on that. As I'm consulting with people that are going through, my process of researching franchises, it's been very, very helpful to, have these podcast episodes where I've been able to, spend a good hour or so taking a deep dive into a specific brand, with the founder or someone from the leadership team. So I'm going to continue to do that, but I also want to focus more this coming year on having interviews with franchise owners, franchisees, right? People that are already doing, what so many of the people I talk to and work with are considering doing, because their stories, I think, can really resonate with people and can also just give people a more realistic idea of what it's like to own a franchise and, whether or not that could be the right direction for them to go into and whether or not that could be a piece of their overarching strategy. So I want to do a lot more of that. I've done some of that in the past, but not as much as I would like to. So, definitely stay tuned. You're going to be hearing from a lot of franchisees that have incredible stories. Most of them are going to be levels above where, my wife and I in our journey as franchise owners. So a lot of really, really successful franchisees that I've already got teed up. And, my hope is that that will lead to, more and more introductions and people that I can have on the show. So that's all kind of on the franchise side of things, right? But I've always, even though my business kind of revolves around franchise ownership in terms of the consulting work that I do and the businesses my wife and I own are franchise businesses, from the very beginning when I started Path to Freedom, I wanted to make sure that it was not only focused on franchising, right? I believe in the franchise business model when it's done right. Um, Owning franchises has had a huge impact, for me and my family, and it's changed our life tremendously, in positive ways. And we'll continue to invest in franchises. I have no doubt about that. But I also believe that in order to achieve true freedom, right? If we're talking financial freedom, I think that, anyone would probably agree that you want a well-rounded investment strategy, right? And owning businesses obviously can be a critical part of that or a key part of that. But, you get to a point where you only have so much time in a day, right? And so, I know for my wife and I, we're very focused on learning more about different types of passive investments and, smart ways to make our money work for us that isn't going to require as much of our time, or oversight. And I think a lot of other people, listening to this show are interested in that. I've gotten some feedback that, the guest I have had on the past that specialize in, whether it's alternative real estate investments or, other types of wealth generation strategies. I've gotten great feedback on that, right? So that's going to be something that I'm going to try to do more of as well. And then the other thing I know that's top of mind for me in terms of things I'm working on personally is mindset, right? And if you listen to the podcast early on, I did a solo series that I called Mindset Monday, and I got good feedback on that. That was just me, though, talking about, kind of what I've learned and what I was experimenting with and what I was trying to get better at and different tips and tactics that I'd kind of picked up, to keep developing my mindset. So hopefully that was valuable, right? But I would never claim to be a mindset expert. So I also want to make sure that going forward, I'm bringing on guests that can really speak to mindset, right? And what we can do, to strengthen our mindset and, how we can use that to keep getting better and better in all aspects of our life. Because again, that's something that I'm very focused on personally, but I also believe that, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful in business and if ultimately you want to go and build the life that you truly want and, get the type of freedom that you want in your life, having a strong mindset is such a critical part of that, right? Whether it's a franchise business or just your corporate career, getting in better shape, from a fitness standpoint, whatever it is, it's going to be very difficult to achieve any level of excellence if you aren't continuously working on developing your mindset. So, those are topics that I plan to really focus on the podcast going forward. So, hopefully at least one of those topics is exciting to you and resonates with you. Ideally, more than one of them is exciting to you. But, while part of this is about me, right? I love doing the podcast because I get to connect with amazing people and I get to learn from every single person that I have on the podcast. But as I've already mentioned, everything I'm doing with Path to Freedom is aimed at, creating value for the listeners and my audience and people that are part of the Path to Freedom community. So I want to hear from you. I want to know, what you want to hear about. And I have gotten some really good feedback over the last couple of years as I've been doing the podcast. But, I want to make sure that I'm delivering as much value as I possibly can through this platform and through the community that I'm building. So if you're on my mailing list, you should be getting an email over the next several days with a link to a short survey. right? The survey will take you 30 seconds, if that, to fill it out. It's only a couple of questions, but if you're willing to take the time to do that, it'll help me best curate, the type of content and information that you're going to be most interested in. And I will take that feedback and implement it. So if you're on my mailing list, please be on the lookout for that email. If you're not on my mailing list, there's a link in the show notes where you can sign up. I promise I won't spam you to death with emails. You'll get no more than a couple of emails a month from me. We are going to start doing a weekly email, just kind of spotlighting the podcast episode that is coming out that week. I do a monthly newsletter, and depending on, your answers to the survey that you'll receive, you may get 1 or 2 additional emails a month. Again, more kind of curated to your specific interests that you've expressed via the survey. I never ask for anything, when I send these emails out. Again, it's all focused on, doing my best to add value, share what I'm learning, share what I have learned, and just try to help people, along their own path to freedom. So, please sign up for my email list if you haven't already. And if you're on the list, I'd ask that you take a few seconds to fill out the survey, as it'll help me better deliver value going forward. Couple of other just kind of changes or updates. I'm gonna try to do more video content. I've never published full video episodes of the podcast before. So those are going to start being available going forward on YouTube, and we'll post a link to the YouTube channel in the show notes here as well. It'll still be available, the audio format like it always has been on, any of the podcast platforms out there. So whether it's Apple or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast platform is, you'll still be able to access the podcast there like always. But we're going to start publishing the full video footage of each episode up on YouTube. And I'm also going to try to put out consistently more short form videos where, I'm answering questions that come in from, my listeners, and, just addressing frequently asked questions that I get, or just talking about something that, I'm experimenting with or learning myself, right? Or tips or tricks that I picked up from, a mentor or someone that I've been following. So gonna make a big effort to try to put out more of that type of information as well. But again, I want to hear from the audience, right? I want to hear, what you guys like, what you want more of. If there's a topic or, a type of guest that I haven't had on the show yet, but you think would be interesting, let me know. Right. And I've mentioned this several times over the years, but if you have a specific guest that you think would be great for the show, let me know, make an introduction. I want to talk to as many different types of people as I can. If at the end of the conversation, they can help someone else, when it comes to creating freedom in their life. So, anyways, that's just kind of a little bit of, I guess, housekeeping. But that's my focus, right? And just to kind of, reframe the podcast for those that have been listening for a long time, or maybe you're a newer listener, or maybe this is the first time you've tuned in for an episode at all. My goal through everything that I'm doing in, building this path to freedom community is to help others learn how they can better create freedom for themselves. Right. And I'm not just talking about financial freedom, although certainly that plays a big part in it. Right. And for those that have been listening or know a little bit of my background, my specialty is franchise ownership. My wife and I own franchise businesses. I've been in franchising for most of my working career. I've worked for franchisors, several pretty large national brands. And now I have a consulting business where I help other people navigate this process of understanding if franchising could be a fit for them, identifying the right types of franchises to even investigate, and then giving them some guidance and some resources as they're going through the actual research process with the franchise companies that they want to learn more about. So yes, that's a business for me, and that's part of the purpose for this podcast, is to create awareness for franchise ownership and, generate interest of people that want to work for me. It's a free service, by the way, doesn't cost you anything. There's no obligation. Quick little free plug there. But what I'm driving at here is, while all of that is part of the reason for the podcast, it's not the only reason, right? And it's exactly why not every guest that I have on the show is involved in franchising as a franchisee or as a franchisor, right? Because I'm a very big believer in several things when it comes to this topic of freedom. And the first thing is that if we're talking financial freedom, while franchise ownership can be a great fit for many people, it's been amazing for me and my family. It's not for everyone, right? Or I know good and well that not everyone listening to this podcast is at the right point in their life where starting a franchise could make sense for them. They may just not be ready for whatever reason. They may not yet have the financial resources to invest in a franchise business. I also know business owners that are amazing entrepreneurs and have had tremendous success, but they would not do well in a franchise system, right? With a franchise, you do have kind of a playbook that you have to follow, right? There's some, guardrails that you have to operate within. And, depending on the business and the franchise, they can be more lenient than others. But the point is, there are definitely people out there that are probably too entrepreneurial to where a franchise is going to make sense for them, or to where they would really enjoy it. So I understand and I believe that, franchise ownership is not for everyone, and it's not, necessarily going to be part of the strategy for every single person listening to this show when it comes to creating financial freedom for themselves. So for that reason, again, I want to make sure, that anyone listening to this podcast gets some sort of value from it, right? The other thing I believe when it comes to freedom is that freedom does not just come from financial freedom or financial success, right? To me, true freedom is, the ability to keep pursuing excellence in every key aspect of your life, right? That does include financial, right? Whether you like it or not, the more financial resources you have, the more freedom you have, right? The more flexibility you have, right? You're not necessarily, tied to a paycheck just to make ends meet. The better of a position you're in to help other people, you have more investment opportunities that can, make your money work for you and continue to grow. So absolutely, the financial piece is part of this equation. But I also believe that, to really achieve freedom in your life, you need to be improving in your relationships, right? You need to be improving in your, health and fitness, right? I mean, you could have all the money in the world, you could be a billionaire, right? But if you're very unhealthy, you're not even going to be able to enjoy that, right? That's not real freedom, right? So again, my underlying goal here is to help everyone, no matter where you're at, what your interests are, pick up something that's going to help them create more freedom for themselves than they have today, and, help you along your own path, or help you start charting your own path, to freedom. And freedom can look different, for different people, but that's the goal here, right? So just wanted to kind of reiterate that, because, there's a ton of podcasts out there that you could go and listen to that are the so-and-so franchise podcast, or Fran this or Fran that. And, I'm good friends with a lot of those people, and I've learned a ton from a lot of those people that have franchise specific podcasts out there. And, as I've said, you'll continue to hear from a lot of great franchise experts on this show. that will always be a part of this show. But I also want to make sure that this is a place that someone who maybe has zero interest in getting into a franchise or just isn't yet in a place where that's even a consideration yet, can still get value, can still learn something, and can still take away, some tangible, actionable items that they can apply in their life that are going to help them, continue to pursue freedom and continue to pursue excellence. So that's really what I wanted to touch on today. I did want to leave you guys with one quick thought, and this is just something that I was reading earlier today, but it hit me, like a ton of bricks. So I thought I would share it here. I've got, as I've already mentioned, I've got big plans, right, for not just the podcast, but what I want to build with Path to Freedom. And I really want to build a community where, not only am I adding value, but the members of the community are adding value to each other. I want this to be a place where, again, people can just come and learn things that are going to help them create a better life for themselves and, really cultivate the type of life that they really want to live. And in order to do that, in order for me to, hit some of these really big, if you've read the book Good to Great, right? I've got some BHAGs, right? Some big, hairy, audacious goals that I've set. You could call them stretch goals, whatever you call them. In order for me to achieve any of this or come anywhere close to it, I'm going to have to get really freaking uncomfortable, right? I'm going to have to push myself. I'm going to have to push the limits of what, I've been able to accomplish up to this point. It's just what's going to be necessary in order for me to achieve any of the goals that I've set for myself. Right. And I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. I will have some failures along the way. And I have to remember that those failures are nothing more than a learning experience that I can build off of. And it's going to get me one step closer to achieving these goals. Right. But I think this is something that, this is something we all struggle with, right? Getting outside of our comfort zone. It's been talked about so much on this podcast up to this point, not just by me, but many of the guests, that I've had on the show. But so anyways, these are all things that we know, right? You set a big goal for yourself. You have to get uncomfortable, right? There's going to be mistakes and failures made along the way. What's the point that I'm getting at? Well, I read a quote earlier this morning from David Goggins. And if you don't know who David Goggins is, check him out. He uses some language that some people may not be that fond of sometimes, but if you can get past that, he's got a great message. He'll light a fire under, anyone listening to him. He'll get you pumped up, right? So read this quote from David Goggins. He said, "You are in danger of living a life so comfortable and soft that you will die without ever reaching your true potential." And that hit me for a couple of reasons, right? I know I've shared this on the podcast before, but one of the things that really shifted with my mindset, 4 or 5 years ago, probably around the time that we were getting into our first franchise business, I had to go through this exercise again when I was leaving, a great job as an employee with salary and bonus and benefits and all of that. But, what really helped me get comfortable taking some of those risks was changing my mindset to one of which I'm more scared of regret than I am of failure. Right? It's a scarier thought to me, to at some point in the future look back and wonder what would have happened if I would have taken that risk than it is to say, I'm going to take this risk. And I understand that there's downside and it could potentially not go very well. So I think Goggins is kind of saying the same thing here, right? You're in danger of living a life so comfortable and soft that you will die without ever reaching your true potential. And here's the reason that hit me when I read it this morning. Right? I mentioned that I took some time, to really unplug around the holidays and stuff. And, some of that was just, I love being with my family, and it's a great time of year. Our businesses slow down a bit. So it's an easy time for us to, take our foot off the gas a bit. But, if I'm really being honest with myself, if I really look in the mirror over the last year or so, I've gotten pretty darn comfortable. Right. And I've kind of started coasting, right? Because for the couple of years before that, 2019, 2020, 2021, I was busting it. I was, making moves. I was taking risk and I was leveling up. Right. And I got to a certain level of success, and I think I kind of just settled in and got comfortable there. Right. And I wasn't pushing myself. I wasn't pushing my limits. I wasn't thinking bigger. I just kind of, for most of 2022, again, if I'm being honest with myself, I just said, hey, this is what I've gotten to, and this is getting pretty darn good results. So I'm just going to keep doing this. And I got to a point later in the year in 2022 where I was just like, man, this is not fulfilling. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm glad that I'm able to help people the way that I am. And, business is good. The income and stuff from all of our businesses has been really good. There's a lot of great things happening, but when I say it's not fulfilling, there was something missing, right? And it was that, you know, continuing to push myself, continuing to step out of my comfort zone in an effort to keep growing and keep leveling up and just keep challenging myself, right? So that's why this quote from Goggins hit me so hard, right? Because this was something I was already kind of wrestling with myself internally a little bit. I already recognized that, I'd let myself get comfortable, and I didn't have many hard days, right? I mean, I kind of woke up and knew what to expect, and I just wasn't intentionally putting challenges in front of myself, with the goal of doing something hard, doing something uncomfortable, because regardless of the outcome, I know I'll come out as a better person on the other side. So that's where my focus is now. And that's where, I come back to some of these big goals that I've set for myself. I'm tired of being comfortable, right? It was nice to do it for a while. I'm not saying that you should, 100% of the time be uncomfortable, but, I think there definitely is such a thing as getting too comfortable, or too soft or too complacent, whatever word you want to use for it, right? I think, if we really want to have a fulfilling life, which I tie into freedom, we've got to be pushing ourselves, right? So in the terms of David Goggins, if you are feeling comfortable, or if you're not, feeling like you want to challenge yourself, stop being a little. Just kidding. I'm not going to say the way he would say it, but you probably get the gist. And again, if you're familiar with David Goggins, you know exactly what he would say. But I would, challenge anyone listening, put some big goals out there, right? Even if you don't know how you would go about accomplishing those goals, just put them out there and start working towards them, right? Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's, relationships that you have in your life. Maybe it's a job you've been at for many years, and, that job's not giving you the opportunity to live up to your full potential, whatever it is. And be honest with yourself, right? But whatever it is, challenge yourself to start thinking bigger, right? And, I would say, you're thinking big when it scares the crap out of you when you think about it, right? And it can be intimidating, right? To throw a big old goal out there, especially if you don't really know, like, how you're going to ever achieve that goal. Like, what's the blueprint to get there? That can be intimidating for sure. But that's how you're thinking big. That's how you're getting ready to start stepping out of your comfort zone. And so, once you've got some of these goals identified, the key is just take the first step, right? Action conquers fear every single time, right? You don't have to even know if it's the right first step necessarily, but once you start taking steps, the pieces of the puzzle will start coming together. You'll start building confidence and you'll start building momentum. Right. And believe me, guys, I'm saying this just as much, if not more, to myself than I am to anyone listening. But wanted to share it because, like I said, I read that quote. It had an impact on me. These are all things that are very, very relevant to me and where I'm at right now. And I would imagine that, most of the people listening to this podcast, if they're really being honest with themselves, there's at least one or two areas of their life where they're like, yeah, I'm probably more comfortable than I should be, in the sense that, I probably could be pushing myself a little bit harder. I'm probably not, anywhere near reaching my full potential, in one area or another. For me, it's a little bit of all of it, right? I want to have a balanced approach. I want to pursue excellence in my health and fitness, right? I want to keep developing, better relationships with key people in my life. There's a lot, that I want to achieve on the business and financial side of things, right? But I think it all has to kind of work in tandem, in order for you to really have a fulfilling life and achieve the freedom that we're all looking for. So with that, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being a listener to the podcast. If you get value from this, the biggest compliment I can ever get is, leave me a review, preferably a 5-star review, but be honest, right? I want your feedback, as I've already said, but, leave a review or, pass the podcast along to someone else that you think would get value from it. That's the biggest compliment that I can ever get. But I do want to try to reach as many people as possible through this, as long as I'm truly adding value to those that are listening. So again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a listener. I'm going to leave you guys with that. Until next week, we'll have more interview episodes coming out on a regular basis. So look out for those on Thursday mornings. With that, hope you have an amazing week. Go drop in, set some big goals.